Welcome to Scaling Your Healthy Food Product podcast, where we believe the process of scaling better for you product doesn't have to be lonely, hard, or complicated, but following simple steps to prepare your product to scale correctly will set you up to succeed. If that is you, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Jacinta. Let's get started, everybody. This week, we're starting with a special announcement. For those who've been listening, there was a draw for food founders, for listeners that have been listening, and the draw was whoever left a review would be put in a draw and would win the 1 hour consultation with yours truly. So I'm going to read the review. Big shout out to Michelle for leaving the review, and this is how the review went. As someone starting a natural food business completely from scratch with no prior experience in the industry, this podcast has helped me build the confidence needed to get started and to keep going. The host is a professional food scientist who brings her real-world experience to each episode, offering helpful tips, practical insights, and small actionable steps that feel manageable and motivating. If you're thinking about launching a natural food product, this podcast is a must listen. Thank you, Michelle, for leaving that review. It's always fun when you receive a review from a listener, because for those when you're recording a podcast, you don't really see your listeners or interact with them. So those reviews is like fuel for us to keep going. And for me, especially because this is like a love letter for all the food founders and all the food entrepreneurs that are working on launching their product, because I want to be there for you to just keep rooting for you and keep you motivated and keep going, because you do know that there's somebody out there that is there for you, cheering you on to get to the finish line, because my mission is to see more of those food products in the food shelves, because people are looking for them and we're always looking for them. So I want to give you all the tips that you need for us to be able to see those products on the store shelves. So keep up the good work. Thank you for that review. For those who still wanted to leave a review, you can go ahead and leave the review. But Michelle, congrats. Send an email to jacinta@kamaresearch.com for you to claim the consultation, and looking forward to working with a lot of you. So this week we have an interesting topic. But before I give us the interesting topic, I just wanted to come back and say, because this past weekend was the marathon weekend, and yours truly crossed the finish line. So excited. I have already passed the half marathon goal. That was my goal for the year. So it's checked. I just want to encourage anybody who has that huge goal, including your food business, to keep going, because those simple steps that you make are going to lead you to the finish line. So keep up the good work and keep those steps going, because in the end, we're going to get that food product in the store shelves. All right, so this week, we're talking about smart ingredients, bigger margins, how to optimize recipe to scale. So we're going to be talking about the three things that I want you to consider as you're optimizing your recipe and scaling. So the first one is how to identify cost drivers hiding in your recipe. And the two things I want you to look at here is your processing. So when you want to identify the cost drivers that are hiding in your recipe, you look at your processing. As you process your product, as you improve the process of your product, you have to look at ways that you can improve your processing. And when I talk about the processing, it could be anything from skipping a step. Like, let's say if you are mixing your ingredients and you discovered that you could maybe mix the liquid and the dry, and it won't have an impact in how your final product, then you can mix those. And by you cutting down a step, it's going to save you time that would eventually lead into like reducing your cost. And in this one, I'm talking about let's say if you have a step where you have to wait for a certain period of time, and you are thinking by you waiting a certain period of time, especially if it's like a gluten-free product, you tend to put ingredients, and sometimes you have to give it time, whether you work it by the blending or you give it time for the gluten to form with the different ingredients. If you find that in the process, if you increase your speed by, like, let's say 2 RPMs, and that still gives you the same product, then you could save time that way. And something that you used to process for, it would take you maybe 3 hours, would now be an hour. And you have to look at it this way. Like, maybe you can say time is not really a big factor, but it is, because if you think about how many people you're paying, especially the labor, this is where labor is huge, because if you're going to pay your employees for like 3 hours now for this specific process, and then it continues because you have to bake it and to package it, and just the cooling process, depending on how your process is, you could tend to reduce the costing of labor. And labor is usually an intensive cost for any food manufacturing, or manufacturing for in that case. So if you can cut down processing, if you can cut down like some of the processing that you do, it would save you a good chunk of time, and just more like you're improvising, and you're improving your process, and you're making it in such a way that it's easier. I'll give you an illustration. I think it was a few years ago, I went to a course. This was for extrusion. For those who don't know, I also do like some extruded products, like the snack products. And this one, I was just going to polish up my knowledge in extrusion. And as we're discussing with the other attendees, one of them was talking about how just in their process alone, they were able to, I think it was like a dryer, or they were able to dial down like some of the temperatures, because they discovered that they didn't need it to be such a higher temperature. And they had been baking this product or drying this product in, like, I think it was like 300 degrees Fahrenheit for the longest time. So then when you calculate the energy and the cost that they were incurring just through the drying process, I think it was like astronomical. But what they found was, by just reducing by a few degrees, they were able to save costing by, when he did the calculation, I think it almost ended up being like 150,000 for the year, just by them reducing by that small degree. So then it just brought it to, by them seeing that, because they were able to analyze it, to be able to see how they were saving. And when they analyzed it, they were surprised by how much money they were able to save. So, because you could say, Jacinta, I don't see how this is going to impact me, or how is this is going to be relevant to my processing. But I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to look at your process, whether it's mixing or whether you're molding. Like, what are some of the things that you could do to be able to reduce the costing? Because if you can reduce the number of hours that you're using to produce a certain product, then you're saving money. And if you can, even the other way is, if you're increasing the quantity of the product, you can reduce the time, but then you can also become efficient and increase the quantity that you're producing within that time. Then you become even more profitable that way. So it's a challenge that I'm throwing back at you, like processing. Look at your process. What are some of the things that you could be doing to be able to reduce cost? And you might not see the margins right away, but if you continue to continuously improve, you will see the margin in a period of like 6 months, or 3 to 6 months, and a year. So think about that. Think about your process and see what you can do, or where you can cut to be able to reduce your cost and save money. The other one is ingredients. And because this is the thing, when you develop a product, and sometimes you're almost like tied to your ingredients that you develop this product, because you tend to you're kind of like married, like the ingredients are like married. And especially if this is an original recipe, and then you have like other SKUs that are coming out of that, different flavors, but you do have your original recipe. This is like your recipe that everything was born from. And in some ways you tend to, or you can tend to just look at that just that product as is and all the ingredients, and you don't want to change anything. But what I want you to think about is the ingredients that you have in the recipe or in your formulation. Are there some raw materials or some ingredients in your recipe that you don't necessarily need it? Like, and I mean like in terms of the functionality and the product and how it is, the taste, the texture, everything to do with the product. Is there an ingredient that you may need and you don't need? Just think about it and put your products. And this can be like a good example. Let's say you're putting dates, like the date paste in your product, and you also have like some brown sugar somewhere. Could you remove one of the sugars if the functionality of it is just the sweetening or the bulking of the product and just how the product reacts? Is there an ingredient that you could remove that you don't necessarily need it? And the other thing could be maybe you add salt in which this is a very low priced ingredient, but do you have like another ingredient that you're adding in there that is already adding the sodium that you need in that recipe and you don't necessarily need it? So it's a way of you thinking about it outside of the recipe and think about the functionality. So this is why you tend to give yourself time to think about the function of every ingredient in your recipe. If an ingredient overlaps and you don't necessarily need one or the other, this is where you can evaluate everything and remove. And this is a thing where I see a lot, especially in the gluten-free, because you tend to say, I need psyllium for the fiber, I need this for the bulking, I need this for the sweetener, I need this to be able to build like the gluten without the gluten. And sometimes we tend to just add and not really look at the ingredient as is and see what can be removed for the product to still function as it's supposed to function and still give it the functionalities and the qualities that our consumers are raving about. But some raw materials, we don't really need them. Some ingredients, we don't really need it in that recipe. So think about that. This is something that I was going to bring it to you because I want you to identify those cost drivers that are hiding in your recipe. So I've given you two: processing and ingredients. So think about those and see where something can be reduced or increased to be able to be more cost effective and to increase your margins. The other thing is like smart swaps. So this is the second one. You swap some raw materials and sourcing strategies to improve margins. So this one is like blends, for example, because we do have suppliers that do make blends. Like especially when you have the inclusions, when you have those different varieties that you're having different inclusions. It could be seeds, for example. You could have a supplier. You do have a supplier that can mix the blends for you. Let's say if you have like chia and you have psyllium, or you have other seeds. Or like, let's say quinoa, for example, you have chia, quinoa that you're adding as inclusion. Those are three, and maybe like another herb. But most of the time, like those inclusions, the seeds and chocolate, for example, and you're adding it in your product. So the thing is, when it comes to your processing, you have somebody that is weighing all the different ones and blending it. So that's a step. Those ones are usually done before your production, so that the day of your production, you have them already lined up. Can you remove some of those processes? Because some suppliers, they already have the process and it's easier for them to do it. And if you have the volume that makes sense, you could give them that task and you remove that task from your processing. So they are blending the inclusions that you need, or even the spices that you're using in your formulation and the seasonings, and you don't have to worry about the mixing process, and you are removing that task from your pool of the list of things that you have to do. So blends is a good one, and you can talk to your suppliers. If you need ideas, let me know. The other one is other ingredients that can enhance a certain attribute in your recipe. And this one last year was a big one because of cacao now has gone up. Like the prices of cacao has gone up just with everything that's going on. The prices have gone up. And a lot of talks last year and even this year is talking about how do you replace chocolate? How do you replace the cacao in the chocolate and still have that flavor and still have, so that you're not changing like the product, you're not changing how your product is functioning. And one of the reasons, one of the ways is they have, like, there are some compounds in fruits and vegetables that do bring out the chocolate in it, like the anthocyanins and all the other compounds. And there are some ingredients that are low priced that you can add. And some of these ingredients are like they're upscale at the bottom of the chain. So they're not expensive. They're not too expensive raw materials, and you can add them back in your product and reduce some of the cacao, for example, and still be able to have a good product, but you're not changing anything in your product, but you're just reducing costs. So those are smart swaps that you can do, adding one and reducing the most expensive ingredient to be able to still have a holistic same product, but you're not incurring a lot of cost, because we want to reduce the cost as much as we can, but we still want to maintain the quality of our product the way our consumer is used to and the way we're used to. So those are some of the things that you can do to improve your product and to improve your margins. So I given you two in there, in the swaps and the sourcing strategies, and these are the blends and other ingredients that could enhance some of the qualities that you have in your product, but they are cheaper or less cost compared to some of the most expensive raw materials that you have in your recipe. And this one is mostly a lot, especially in the natural, the organic, the plant-based. Some of those ingredients are usually higher priced. So if you can find strategies, smart ways to swap some of the ingredients that will still make it work for your product, then why not? And then the third one is how to future-proof your recipe formula as you grow, because you're going to grow, but how do you future-proof your recipe and your formula? One of the ways I want you to think about this is like always sourcing alternate ingredients, and you never stop. Like you never stop sourcing alternate ingredients, because you don't want to be in a point where you're just solely depending on one supplier. And if, let's say, you're bringing it from overseas and something happens in the shipping, you're not able to produce your product. You have all these other raw materials in your warehouse, but you're not able to produce the product because you're missing one key ingredient. So always sourcing is I always do that. Like I'm always looking for other suppliers that can give me similar raw material to the one that I'm using. So you're always sourcing and you're always getting samples in and evaluating to make sure that you're still going to get the same quality of product. At least you want to have an alternate supplier or ingredient for every major ingredient that you have in your product. You want to have an alternate, like a secondary supplier that you have in case one doesn't work out. You're able to use this one. But the only way you can effectively do that is always planning and always looking for other suppliers. Go to trade shows. Don't stop going to trade shows. Supplier nights, go to them. Get to know as many as you can, because by you being introduced to new ones, you might be introduced to some that you didn't necessarily know that they were existing when you first developed your product, and you only got like a few and evaluated a few. But always, even before you decide on a raw material, this is one thing that I always do, and I always encourage other food developers to do, is get a pool of different suppliers, evaluate several raw materials the same kind, and go with the best one that you think that you can go with. Or of the pool that you get, like which one do you want to go with, and which one will be your alternate if you get to that point where you need, and most of the time you do need, because something always happens with the supply chain and you need it. And it's always good. That's why I'm always telling you, plan ahead, because when you have it, it's a matter of sending that email or placing a call and say, hey, I need this. And it's easier to just swap them in and out compared to now you have to look for something else. And if you do it in a rush, you don't get the same product and your consumer is going to find out, you lose sales. But in the beginning, you want to think about how can you always be ahead, always increasing margins and always saving cost other than incurring cost. So that's why I want you to think about that. And then the second one is the process improvement. This is the same thing. You always have to keep improving your process, keep working on it, because the more you keep working on it and improving it, the better you get, the more efficient you become. And margins too. You get to increase your margins, and you get to enjoy being profitable in your processing and be profitable in your production. So those are the three things that I wanted you to think about and to keep in mind, because especially as things keep getting expensive, the tariffs, it's always a good thing to think about all these smart ways that we can increase our margins and how we can optimize our recipes and be able to scale and get better at what we do and be able to put out these great products that everybody is wanting to have in the market, and for us to be able to enjoy all these good products that you're working on. So the three is how to identify cost drivers hiding in your recipe, and that's processing and ingredients, and then the smart swaps and sourcing strategies to improve margin. So those are the blends, and you can talk to your supplier and other ingredients that can enhance some of the major ingredients that you have to be able to reduce the major ones in your recipe. And the third one is how to future-proof your recipe and the formula as you grow. So always sourcing alternate ingredients, you never stop. And then process improvement. Just always think about ways for you to improve your process, and this will save you time, and this will increase your bottom line. So there you go. So that's it for this week. Until next week, keep scaling your food business. Remember, I am cheering you on, and my mission is to see more food businesses, healthy food businesses, better for you, plant-based in the food aisle. So remember, I'm cheering you on. So this week, as you make a step closer to your dream, to seeing your products in the market or seeing the growth that you deserve, remember, I am cheering you on. Until next week, keep scaling your business.